I found out my daughter isn't mine while my wife was in a coma. My wife of 17 years is in a coma right now, lying perfectly still and silent in a sterile, beige hospital bed. The good news, the doctors keep telling me, with a practiced, gentle optimism, is that they expect her to make a full recovery. They say it like it's a gift, a miracle I should be celebrating. But as I sit here in this uncomfortable, cracked vinyl chair, the relentless, rhythmic beeping of machines charting the life in her body, I don't know if I even want her to wake up. At least, I don't want her to wake up the stranger who now occupies my wife's body. The woman I married is already gone. That life we built, the one I cherished, is a lie. That life is over. We've always had what I thought was a beautiful relationship, the kind of storybook romance people get cynical about. We were high school sweethearts, married young, built a home, and had two beautiful kids. We were a team, a single, indivisible unit against the world. At least, that's what I believed until a few nights ago. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the red digital numbers on the nightstand glowing a malevolent 3 a.m. She still wasn't home from her girls' night. I tried to reason with the frantic, terrified voice that was screaming in my head. She's fine. She's with her best friend, Zoe. Her phone probably died. Don't be that guy. Don't be the controlling husband. I wanted to believe it, to just roll over, close my eyes, and trust her. But deep down, in that primal part of a husband's gut, the part that knows the rhythm of your partner's life as well as your own, I knew that wasn't the case. This wasn't just paranoia. A couple of years ago, we had a scare that had shaken us both to the core. She'd taken an Uber home from a work function, a simple, routine event. But the driver, instead of turning onto our street, kept driving, his eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror with a look that turned her blood to ice. He was heading toward his own neighborhood, ignoring her increasingly panicked demands to stop the car. She'd managed to get out at a red light, to run, her heart pounding, and call the police. But the terror of that night, the feeling of absolute powerlessness, lingered for both of us. We made a promise to each other then, a solemn vow born of fear and love. If she wasn't home when she said she'd be, if she wasn't answering her phone, I would come look for her. No questions asked. Safety first, always. It was our pact. And so, honoring that promise, I did. I threw on a pair of jeans and a hoodie, the fabric cold against my skin. I got in my car and started speeding through the silent, sleeping suburban streets, my headlights cutting through the darkness, heading towards Zoe's place. As I was driving, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my phone buzzed. A notification from my wife, Mia. It looked like a picture, a thumbnail of something I couldn't make out. But just as my finger went to tap it open, the notification vanished. A new one took its place. This message was deleted. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate bird trapped in a cage. I immediately called her. The phone rang once, a single, hopeful trill, and then she declined the call. Instantly, panic, cold and sharp and suffocating, flooded my veins. What was going on? When I finally screeched to a halt in front of Zoe's tidy brick house, I didn't even bother trying Mia's number again. I called Zoe. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice sounding flustered and overly sleepy, as if I'd woken her from a deep slumber. She opened the front door a crack, her robe pulled tight around her. As I stepped inside the foyer, my ears strained for any sound. And then I heard it. From upstairs. A faint giggle, quickly muffled. Mia ese giggle. A sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. A sound that had been a soundtrack to my life for nearly 2 decades. My own heart turned to a leaden weight in my chest. I started making my way up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Wait! Zoe's voice was a sharp hiss behind me. She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She's not up there, she said quickly, her eyes darting nervously toward the top of the staircase. Refusing to meet mine. She's in the bathroom. You don't need to go up there. The way she said it, the desperate, anxious edge to her voice, the terrible acting, was all the confirmation I needed. I disregarded her completely, shaking her hand off my arm and continuing my ascent, all while she started trying to literally, physically pull me back down the stairs. I managed to get her off me, my mind a roaring inferno of betrayal and adrenaline. And when I got to the top of the stairs, when I pushed open the door to the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, that's when I saw it. My wife, my Mia, was in bed with a man I had never seen before in my life. They weren't doing anything, not in that moment. They were just lying there, fully clothed on top of the comforter, their heads close together, cuddling and laughing at something on his phone. The scene was so shockingly domestic, so casual in its intimacy, that it was a million times more devastating than if I'd walked in on something sordid and hidden. This wasn't a mistake. This was comfortable. This was familiar. My head started spinning. A red haze descended over my vision, and the rational part of my brain just shut down. I just lost control. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor, on top of him, the stranger's surprised face beneath me, and I was wailing blows on him, my fists connecting with his flesh and bone over and over and over again. Zoe was screaming a high panic sound, calling me a psychopath. She and Mia scrambled to pull me off of him, their hands and nails clawing at my back and shoulders, their screams a chaotic symphony of terror. They eventually succeeded in dragging me off. I stumbled back against the wall, gasping for air, my knuckles raw and bloody, the coppery tang of his blood in my mouth. I looked at Mia, her face a mask of shock and fear. I looked at the stranger, whose face was now a bloody, swollen pulp. And then I told them both that I was leaving. I pointed a shaking finger at my wife, the woman I no longer recognized. "You have 5 minutes to be in my car," I said, my voice a low, dangerous rasp I didn't recognize as my own. "Or I'm going home without you." She followed me downstairs immediately, her bare feet silent on the carpeted stairs. Mascara was already streaming down her face in black rivulets. She kept whispering, I'm so sorry, the whole ride home, a pathetic, broken mantra that meant nothing. But I just ignored her. I stared straight ahead at the dark, winding road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the silence in the car a screaming, deafening, unbearable thing. My silence, my refusal to engage, made her angry. The apologies curdled into accusations. She began screaming, her voice raw and hysterical, calling me a psycho for following her, for not trusting her, for ruining everything. But I still wasn't responding. I was a stone wall. So she did the only thing she could think of to get a reaction, to force me to look at her, to engage with her. She grabbed the steering wheel. The car swerved violently, tires screeching, lurching into the oncoming lane. Headlights, bright and terrifying like the eyes of some nocturnal predator, bore down on us. I wrenched the wheel back, fighting her for control, my muscles screaming with the effort. But it was too late. The other car veered to avoid us, its horn blaring a long, mournful note in the night, and in the chaotic, sickening ballet of metal and momentum, we smashed through a wooden guardrail at 60 miles per hour. The world became a blur of twisting metal, shattering glass, and the sickening, final sound of impact. Mia's body jerked violently in the passenger seat, a grotesque dance with physics, her head snapping back against the headrest, and then she was still. She passed out on the spot, a trickle of blood starting to run from her temple. Our kids, our beautiful, innocent children, Logan and Ella, still don't know we've been in an accident. I haven't called anyone. My parents think we're on a cruise, a lie we told to get some alone time. I'm just sitting here beside her as she sleeps a sleep she can't wake from, machines breathing for her, and I'm having rolling panic attacks. My body trembling, trying to process the tangled, toxic, impossible mess of my own feelings. A huge part of me, the part that feels flayed and raw and utterly betrayed, wants to just walk out of this room and never, ever look back. I want to call her parents, tell them exactly what their perfect daughter did, what happened on that road, and let them know that after all these years of me loving and caring for her, she's their problem again. We said for better or for worse at the altar 17 years ago, and I meant every single word. But she ended our marriage in that stranger's bed, not on that dark road. I want to leave her a note that just says, too bad worse happened after you ended our relationship. The only thing keeping me in this damn room, this purgatory of beeping machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, is my children. My God, I want to see them so badly right now. I want to hold them and smell their hair and feel their small arms around my neck. But I have deep, angry scratches on my face and neck from the shattered glass of the crash. They'd know something was wrong if they saw me. As much as I feel my wife has defiled herself, our vows, our family, and our entire history, my kids need her. I thought I had a life partner, a co-captain for this long, unpredictable journey of parenthood. And as horrible as she turned out to be, as much as I now loathe the very sight of her still, pale face, my children need a mom. There will be talks in the future about puberty and heartbreaks that I'm not qualified to have. There will be scraped knees and hurt feelings that need a mother's gentle touch, injuries that need soft kisses instead of my gruff, default, walk it off. I'm a damn good father. I know that in my bones. But I can't be a mother, too. I clutch my phone, scrolling through the pictures of the kids, a digital slideshow of a life that now feels like an elaborate, cruel lie. Logan at his baseball game last weekend, hitting a double and grinning with pure, unadulterated pride as he stood on second base. Ella, my little artist, my sweet girl, showing me a picture she drew of our family with her favorite purple crayon, all four of us holding hands with giant happy smiles. How do I tell them their family isn't what they thought it was? How do I tell them their mother shattered it into a million unrecognizable pieces? How do I protect their innocent hearts from the fallout that's coming, a tsunami of pain that I can see on the horizon, but am powerless to stop? How can I sit here and look at this woman, this stranger, who has stabbed me in the back so cruelly? Should I call her parents to come take my place? Would I even tell them? If I don't tell them the truth about what she did, they'll know something is wrong. They'll see the rage on my face, the contempt in my eyes. I can't fake emotion like Mia apparently can. When I loathe someone, it's written all over me. They'll know I'm angry at their mother, and they'll demand to know why. How did my life come to this? I know I need to see a lawyer. I'll figure that much out. But how do I handle the immediate, the human, the impossible part of this? Every time a nurse comes in to check on Mia, they give me these soft, sympathetic looks, assuming I'm the worried, loving husband, the hero keeping a bedside vigil. If they only knew the truth, they'd understand why my hands are shaking with barely suppressed anger instead of concern. After I posted my story online, a torrent of advice and support flooded in, but I was in such a fog of grief and rage that I couldn't even process it. I decided to stay one more night in that hospital room, a final act of something, I'm not sure what. Mercy? Duty? Weakness? With the lights out, I lay back in the recliner, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the rhythmic whoosh and beep of the medical machines that were keeping her tethered to this world. Part of me felt I was showing an undeserved mercy just by being in the same room as her. Yet another, more treacherous part of me still loved her, or at least loved the woman I thought she was for 17 years. I didn't want to feel that love. It felt like a weakness, a betrayal of my own justifiable pain. I kept coming back to the same brutal and inescapable realization. There was no fixing this. Our life, the one we had built brick by brick over 17 years, was gone, destroyed as completely and irrevocably as if a natural disaster had swept through it and left nothing but foundation. I cried then, a deep, ragged, silent crying for the death of my marriage, for the end of my life as I knew it. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself when the nurse came in for her morning rounds. I went down to the hospital cafeteria, a sterile, joyless place, and stared at a plate of untouched, cooling scrambled eggs. I must have looked like hell. Unshaven, my clothes wrinkled from sleeping in the chair, my eyes red and raw from crying, and a complete lack of sleep. An unread text from Zoe glowed on my phone. A single, accusatory question. Where is Mia? I ignored it. At 7 a.m., I decided it was late enough. I drove to my in-laws' house. Her dad was always an early riser, and I found him in his workshop out back, the smell of sawdust and coffee hanging in the air. He saw the scratches on my face and the ugly bruise blooming on my cheek, and his own face clouded with worry. I explained that there had been an accident, that Mia had gotten the worst of it. We sat in their warm, familiar kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, a comforting constant in a world that had suddenly gone insane. The scent now seemed to mock the wholesome family life that had just been shattered. I told them about the crash first, sparing them the ugliest, most damning details. They cried, a raw, parental grief for their injured daughter. But as they started talking about how they would help take care of her, how they would rally around us, I had to stop them. I told them that the accident wasn't the real reason I was there. They looked confused as I told them the whole, ugly story. Waking up in the middle of the night, driving to Zoe's, walking in on Mia and some stranger, the fight, the furious drive home. They were utterly, completely, and devastatingly shocked. I gave them her hospital room number and told them that while I hoped we could remain friendly for the sake of the kids, I was divorcing their daughter. She had broken our vows. She wasn't my wife anymore. They tried to plead with me, not to be hasty, that she had made a terrible mistake, all the usual, hollow excuses people make when faced with an uncomfortable truth. I just smiled a sad, empty smile, told them I had loved having them as my in-laws, and walked out the door, leaving them in the ruins of their own denial. From there, I went to my parents' house. My dad was watching the kids while they thought we were on our anniversary cruise. I walked in, my father took one look at my face, and I didn't even have to say anything. I just grabbed him, hugged him, and cried like a child. I told them everything. They were stunned, heartbroken for me, for the kids. As we were talking, a painful silence hanging in the air, I heard my daughter Ella squeal, "Daddy," and the sound of her little feet pounding down the stairs. Logan was right behind her. Seeing them, hugging them, hearing their innocent, happy chatter about their sleepover with Grandma and Grandpa was like a balm on my raw, bleeding soul. For the first time in days, I felt a reason to live, a reason to fight through this hell. The following days were a blur of logistics and a deep, gnawing pain. Mia's phone had been destroyed in the crash, but that night, I started getting texts from my mother-in-law's phone, texts that I knew were from Mia, full of desperate apologies and pleas. I ignored them. I met with 3 different law firms, determined to find the most ruthless, effective representation I could. My primary focus was custody. I didn't want full custody. The kids, I still believed, needed their mother, no matter how broken and untrustworthy she was. But I needed to ensure she could never be a part of my personal life again. A neutral go-between could handle drop-offs. There was no reason for me to ever have to speak to her or see her face again. I found a lawyer, a sharp, fiercely intelligent, and deeply empathetic woman named Tara. She was rated highest in the state for representing men in complex divorce cases, and after hearing my story, she took my case herself. She was incredible. She immediately asked if I'd had an STD panel. I had, it was clean. She asked if I had documented the infidelity. I hadn't been thinking rationally enough to take pictures. She immediately set up a meeting with a private investigator her firm used regularly. My state is an at-fault state, so evidence was crucial to ensure the divorce went my way. Tara's firm arranged for a paralegal, a kind woman named Karen, to be the official go-between for all communication regarding the children. And then, Tara gave me a list of things to do, of documents to gather. One of them, which she presented as simple, standard protocol in any infidelity case, was to get 2 drugstore DNA kits. I thought nothing of it. That night, after the kids were asleep, I swabbed my cheek, and then I gently swabbed the inside of my sleeping children's cheeks. I sealed the envelopes and mailed them off the next morning without a second thought. 2 days later, on a Friday afternoon, I was at my desk at work, trying to focus on a design project, when 2 emails from the lab arrived in my personal inbox. I opened the first link. The results loaded, a string of genetic markers and percentages. The conclusion was clear. Logan was my son. A small, unnecessary, but welcome wave of relief washed over me. I opened the second email and clicked the second link. I read what it said. I read it again, and a third time. My brain refused to process the words on the screen. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just shook my head as silent, desperate, pleading no, no, no. I somehow managed to screenshot the results and email them to myself before I stumbled out of the office and into the concrete anonymity of the parking garage. I made it to my car and I broke down, a wrenching, primal sound of grief and rage tearing from the depths of my soul as the brutal, impossible, life-shattering realization hit me. Ella is not my daughter. I can't imagine losing an arm, a leg, would hurt much more than what I felt in that moment. It was like my soul had been scooped out of my body, leaving a hollow, echoing void. I texted the screenshots of the results to Tara. She called within seconds. "Where are you?" she asked, her voice calm and steady in the storm of my collapse. "Stay put. I'm sending someone to get you." I hung up, fumbled the car door open, and vomited uncontrollably onto the concrete until I was dry heaving. Nothing left inside me but emptiness. A paralegal arrived and drove me to the firm. Tara saw me as soon as she was free from her previous meeting. "Sometimes these home tests can come back wrong," she said gently, offering me a bottle of water, but we both knew it was a lie, a kind but flimsy bandage on a mortal wound. Still, we had to be absolutely sure. The go-between, Karen, arranged to pick up Ella the next day for a special auntie-niece outing. We did the test again, this time at a certified, accredited lab with a chain of custody. There was no mix-up. There was no mistake. The results came back the next day. I am not Ella's biological father. I cried even harder the second time, a wave of grief so profound it felt like it would drown me. I drove to my parents' house, my vision blurred with tears, the world outside my windshield a meaningless smear of color and light. I walked in, and my mom knew instantly that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. I finally managed to choke out the words, the most painful words I have ever uttered. "Aita, Ella is not my daughter." My mom just stared at me, her own hand flying her mouth. She called my dad and told him to come home, that something terrible had happened. We all just sat there in my childhood living room and cried for hours. We were inconsolable. I had lost a wife, and now I had lost a daughter who was never even mine to begin with. Tara and I planned how to confront Mia. The meeting took place in Tara's office, a formal, intimidating space of dark wood and leather-bound books. I arrived first, wanting to control the geography of the room, wanting Mia to be unable to approach me. She arrived on crutches, still wearing 2 casts from the accident. As soon as the recording on the table started, she tried to launch into a practiced, tearful apology. I cut her off. "How many men did you cheat on me with?" I asked, my voice shaking with a rage I could barely contain. "And when did it start?" She tried to downplay it, to only admit to the one man she knew I'd caught her with. But the PI had already found a sickening amount of evidence. Texts, dating app profiles, hookups going back years and years. "Let me be more specific," I said, my voice dripping with a venom I didn't know I possessed. "Roughly how many men have you slept with since our son was born?" The specific time frame made her pause, her eyes widening in panic. That's when Tara, with a calm, deliberate movement, slid the official, notarized paternity results for Ella across the polished mahogany table. Her reaction was all the proof I needed. She was genuinely, completely shocked. She tried to stammer, but you're her father. You raised her," but I shut that down immediately. "Who is her real father?" I demanded, my voice breaking. She looked down, her shoulders shaking with sobs, and in a voice so quiet I could barely hear it, she said the words that broke what was left of my heart. "I don't know for sure." I broke down then. I couldn't take it anymore. She tried to explain, her words a torrent of self-pity and flimsy excuses. She talked about her postpartum depression after Logan was born, how I had been so supportive, but she had felt dead inside. How her friend Zoe had convinced her to go out for just one drink. How one drunken, meaningless encounter had led to another, and another, and another. She said she started hooking up with random men she met on dating apps. Men she met at bars, men she met at the grocery store, just for the validation, for the fleeting thrill of being desired. She swore she always used protection, but admitted it had broken a few times with a few different guys. She said she never wanted emotional connections, so she had a rule: never sleep with the same man more than 3 times. It was a strategy, a game, to keep things simple. She said she never told me because she didn't want to lose the security, the comfortable life that I provided. I was dumbfounded. It was like learning the last 17 years of my life had been a lie, a carefully constructed reality show that I never signed up for. The woman I married, the mother of my children, was a complete and utter stranger. A stranger who had not only betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable, but had brought a child into our home that was not mine, and had let me love that child with my whole heart as my own for 6 long years. The meeting ended with me screaming at her, asking her what I had ever done to deserve this, how she could do this to her own daughter, to our family. I felt used, humiliated, emasculated, and utterly defeated. Our marriage wasn't just over. It was scorched earth. All that remained was counting the casualties. After that meeting, everything escalated. Tara drew up the most aggressive divorce papers imaginable. We also filed a separate civil suit for paternity fraud to recover the financial expenses of raising a child that wasn't mine. It wasn't about the money. I told Tara I would set up a trust for Ella with any settlement we won. It was about accountability. It was about creating a constant, costly, and lifelong reminder of what she had done. The kids came back to live with me, and the reunion was a heartbreaking mix of pure joy and profound sorrow. Ella, my sweet, innocent Ella, just looked up at me as I got her out of the car, and with a wisdom far beyond her 6 years, she walked into my arms and just hugged me as tightly as her little arms could. That child broke me, and then she started to put me back together. In that moment, holding her, I realized we were both victims of the same person. And as the adult, as her dad, it was my job to protect her no matter what. I told her I loved her, and for the first time since I found out the truth, it felt uncomplicatedly, absolutely true. My love for her was real, even if her biology wasn't. But then, that night, as I was tucking her into bed, she whispered, "Mommy loves you." She told me to tell you. Mia was using our children to manipulate me. I saw red. I drove straight to my in-laws' house and confronted her in her childhood bedroom where she was recovering. I told her she was a pitiful excuse for a human, that her petty games were over, and that she would not use our children as pawns in her sick psychodrama ever again. I told her the kids were staying with me for the foreseeable future, until she had earned the right to even be called a mother again. Mia's family, after I finally sat them down and told them the full, unvarnished truth, the 47 confirmed partners the PI had found so far, the paternity fraud, the years of lies disowned her. Her father, a man I had respected for nearly 2 decades, threw her belongings into her car and kicked her out of his house. She became homeless, living out of her car, just as I almost had months before. My lawyer, Tara, in a stroke of strategic genius, offered to pay for Mia to see a therapist, framing it as a gesture of goodwill to the court. Mia chose a local psychiatrist who, after one single session, recognized her profound instability and had her committed to the hospital's psychiatric ward for observation. That overnight stay turned into months of intensive inpatient care. During that time, with Mia incapacitated and unable to contest anything, my petition to adopt Ella proceeded through the courts. In a quiet, surreal, and tearful courtroom hearing, the judge asked Ella if she wanted me to be her daddy. She found the question hilarious, of course, because in her innocent heart, I already was. But hearing her giggle and say yes, and hearing the judge's gavel fall, making it legal, making her mine in the eyes of the law and the world, was one of the single happiest and most healing moments of my entire life. The divorce was finalized shortly after. I was officially, finally free. But Mia's story, I was to learn, wasn't over. Months later, she was released from the psychiatric facility. The hospital couldn't notify me due to confidentiality laws. The first I heard of it was a frantic call from my children's school. Mia had shown up, demanding to see them, causing a massive, disruptive scene in the front office. By the time I arrived, the police were already there. She lunged at me, screaming and crying a wild, broken thing. I had a restraining order filed against her that same day. For a few days, she stalked us, her car a constant, menacing presence in our rearview mirror, until a judge granted the order and she was served. Then, she vanished. About 3 months ago, a large, thick manila envelope arrived in the mail with a return address from Sydney, Australia. It was a long, rambling, 20-page manifesto from Mia. She had met a man online, an Australian, and had cashed out her entire 401k to flee the country and start a new life. The letter was a bizarre, self-serving, and utterly delusional attempt to explain her actions, to garner some last shred of sympathy. She wrote about her depression, her desperate need for validation, how she still loved me, how she was jealous that I got to keep Ella. It was the delusional perspective of a woman who had burned her entire world to the ground and still saw herself as the primary victim of the fire. She wrote that her new man had a son who needed a mother. I pitied that poor child, but she was gone. She was an ocean away, a problem for another continent, and hopefully out of our lives for good. Life is quiet now. It's simple. The kids are thriving. Logan is the star pitcher on his Little League team. Ella is a graceful, joyful little ballerina. I'm still in therapy, learning to navigate the treacherous minefield of my own trauma, learning, slowly, how to trust the world again. My lawyer, Tara, after all the dust had finally settled, admitted that she had developed feelings for me during the long, arduous case. She was beautiful and brilliant and kind, and I was deeply flattered, but the thought of opening myself up to that kind of potential hurt again was terrifying. Yet, she had seen me in my absolute worst, a broken, raging, weeping mess of a man, and she hadn't run away. In fact, she had been one of the architects of my survival. So, a few weeks ago, I took a chance. I called her. We went on a date. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and it was easy. It was normal. I don't know where it will lead. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. But for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, I feel something akin to hope. Mia took so much from me. My past, my trust, my sense of self. But she doesn't get to take my future, too. My children deserve to see that a life can be rebuilt after it's been shattered, that love might just be worth the risk, despite the scars. And maybe, just maybe, so do I.